Now we start our session on significance of data. Be strategic in your approach. And this session will shed light on the significance of data in the publishing industry and the need for a strategic approach to leverage data effectively. It will discuss how data analytics, market research, and consumer insights can inform decision-making processes and drive innovation in publishing. The session will explore strategies for collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data to understand better reader preferences, market trends, and content consumption patterns. It will also address privacy concerns and ethical consideration in data management. The session aims to empower publishers with the knowledge and tools to make data-driven decisions and optimize their publishing strategies. And the speakers for these sessions are Vikrant Mathur, who is the Executive Director at Nielsen Book Data India and GCC. Vikrant has over 22 years of experience in client leadership roles and has worked cross verticals including information, technology, and consumer markets. He has shown great dexterity in market intelligence by providing strategic review and for global clients and help them to resolve complex business decisions in a competitive market. Vikrant is a management graduate from Lucknow University, India. I'll request Vikrantji to come on the dais, please. The other speaker we have Mr. Jos Borghino, who is Secretary General IPA. And thank you, Jos, for traveling all the way from Geneva. He has been the Secretary General of the International Publishers Association, Geneva, since 2015. He joined the IPA as Policy Director in 2013 and was in charge of policy development, organizing the Prix Voltaire, IPA's Freedom to Publish Prize, and managing IPA's activities in the educational publishing sector, including the annual What Works Conference and Educational Publishers Forum. Before joining the IPA, Jose was Manager Industry Representation at the Australian Publishers Association. He has been Executive Director of the Australian Society of Authors, a lecturer in literary journalism and creative industries at the University of Sydney, and editor of the online news magazine newmatilda.com. Jose held senior positions at the Literature Board of Australian Council and was the founding editor of Editions Review. Welcome, sir. And we have with us Basant Rathore, who is Senior Vice President, Strategic Planning, Brand and Business Development with Jagran Group. He has earlier worked at media agencies like Ogilvy, Mudra, Mindshare, and Medicine, where he's planned and brought media for leadership brands across diverse categories. He is an alumni from the first PGP batch of MICA, MICA, and did his graduation from the Shriram College of Commerce. He has conducted over 30 media workshops for professionals and has been teaching media as a visiting faculty for over 2 decades across leading institutions like MICA, IIMC, IMT, XMI Bhubaneswar, Flame University, Symbiosis Institute of Media and Communications, and Bennett University.
He changed my name. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you, Pranav. And so I think I welcome everyone on my session on the data importance. And I think it has everybody understand in this room that data has its own importance and strategic value in any business decision that you make. And I can quote some of the quotes of Sherlock Holmes, who said, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has the data." Somebody also said that you can have data without information, but you can't have information without data. And I think with that, I would request first to Jose to have a small presentation and take us through what is happening around the globe on the data. And I'm sure you will understand the consumerism and the data when you look at the information. And then you will realize that how data is important when you look at and compare with the Indian market.
I usually think that PowerPoints are the end of civilization as we know it, but Today I've got a lot of data. I've got a lot of information to share with you, and visually it's better. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jose. Jose, where are you? Jose Borghino, there he is, hiding. I'll ask you afterwards. Jose Borghino, I'm the Secretary General of the International Publishers Association. I'm honoured and very pleased to be with you all today. Yes, I drove all the way from Geneva on a plane. And I'm representing the International Publishers Association as we celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the great Federation of Indian Publishers, a long-standing and stalwart member of the IPA. I want to thank the organisers for inviting me here. Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you, Ashok. Thank you, the other Ashok, and especially Pranav, who's been working very, very hard to put this great program together. I know how much effort it takes to bring these events on stage, and congratulations for a great program. What I love about this program is that it brings voices from outside, not the usual suspects. It brings fresh perspectives to reflect upon age-old issues. I have this from Ashok. He told me that this was their purpose, and I think you've done a great job of seeing that through. So let's see if I can work this. Yay. Okay. The IPA represents 92 national, regional, and specialised publishers association from 76 countries around the world. I'm hoping that by the end of the year we'll crack 100. I think we'll get our century this year. The two core pillars of our work are to promote copyright and to defend the freedom to publish. We also work on areas that are important to all our members, like education, accessibility, sustainability, literacy, and diversity and inclusion. When Karine Panza, my new president from Brazil, took over the IPA at the beginning of this year, she stated that she wanted to focus on data and, through that, how we tell the story of our own markets. I'm very pleased to say that Pranav Gupta is now the chair of a brand new committee of the IPA, the Data and Statistics Committee, and this is the way that Karine is pushing through data and statistics as one of the more important things that we look at. We get data from a few different places. Firstly, the IPA has an ongoing 5-year relationship with the UN agency WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, to build top-level data on the publishing sector. We've also signed an agreement with Nielsen Book India, hello Vikrant, to complement the WIPO figures with more and different metrics that can help us gauge the state of the global publishing industry. The information I share with you today is a sort of meta-analysis of what is out there across the spectrum of data about books. We also have IPA members gathering data and sharing it with us, and various other companies and organisations. My thanks to all of these for sharing their data for this presentation. What I'm about to present demonstrates how many opportunities there are in publishing, but also how we have to work harder to build a compelling external narrative about the innovation in our sector. Throughout, I will be emphasising the extent of digital publishing in various markets, as this is an area of growth around the world. So, where can we start? Oh, no, that's backwards. Yes. So, let me take you to the home region of our new president, Karine Panza, which is Latin America. We have data available for just 3 markets. All of it is industry data that comes directly from publishers and is based on turnover. Digital books represent 4% in Mexico, a surprising 15% in Colombia, and 6% in Brazil. If we take a deeper dive into the Brazilian market, we can see that a la carte downloads drive the digital book market of audiobooks and ebooks. We can also see how they have grown in the last couple of years, but how that growth has been undermined by the high levels of inflation in Brazil. The difference between the nominal and real change shows how dramatic that is. Audiobooks only represent 1% of the Brazilian digital market so far. Ebook sales are evenly split between fiction, non-fiction, and STM. Other digital revenues are from subscriptions and predominantly digital libraries like those held by law firms. Audiobooks fare a little bit better in the subscription market with a 15% share. If we look at the Colombian and Mexico data, we have a lot less granular data than in Brazil, but we can already see the reasons why Colombia is leading for digital books in Latin America. In Colombia, the digital book is not just an e-book or an audio book, but also educational platforms, something that will no doubt resonate with most Indian publishers. Obviously boosted by the COVID pandemic, these platforms have a real impact on the numbers in Colombia, where audiobooks are almost negligible. In Mexico, audiobooks are even less present and print is still very much king. Across these three markets, we have different definitions of digital books. We are at least comparing revenues, but we have vastly different degrees of granularity. And I'll be saying that over and over again. That's the problem with the data that we're gathering. There are clearly opportunities in these markets, but we need to consider that developing countries still struggle to grow their markets because there is a structural barrier for their demand. Aspects like reading habits and reading skills are top difficulties. We cannot solve that problem of increasing demand just by producing more digital content or even more printed books. There are deeper aspects to be discussed and considered. Let's move north to the USA. IPA is an American member. The AAP, the American Association of Publishers, has kindly allowed me to share some data. We are looking here at trade publishing only. Okay, again, another difficulty of trying to get a picture of what's happening across the world using different types of data. But again, we see a real difference in the degrees of granularity in terms of formats and how they make up the book market. Digital books, ebooks, and audio make up nearly 20% of the market in the US. And what is great with this market is that we have the data over at least the last 5 years, which means we can start building a picture of our sector with that kind of data over time. What if we move eastwards? What do we have there? For Asia and Oceania, we can look at 3 markets with a couple of key lessons to be learnt. We have industry data for China and New Zealand, but it is really only top level. We see digital books represent 6% of the Chinese market and 8% of the New Zealand market revenues. For New Zealand, data collection has only just started. Rome was not built in a day, neither was New Delhi, and hopefully we'll have more granularity in a couple of years to come. WIPO does have some data, which is not shown here, for Japan, where they find that digital and audio represents a massive 37.8% of the market revenues. Now we come to a source of publishing data which is broad as well as deep. with the kind of granularity and detail which will help us make long-term predictions and strategic decisions. In 2022, Nielsen Book Data India produced a comprehensive review of the Indian publishing market. The key facts are that there are more than 24,500 publishers in India, the vast majority of which are working in the education sector. The size of the Indian market is very impressive, 720.6 billion rupees in 2019 to 2020, coupled with a stunning projected growth rate, and I'd like to find out if the growth rate is accurate, of 20% over the next few years. But above and beyond these statistics, the significance of this report for me and for the IPA is that it gives the FIP and the IPA an opportunity to speak about publishing both locally and globally with a confidence and a depth of evidence that is absolutely fundamental if politicians, media and the general public are to understand the reach and the importance of our industry. As Minister Irani stated very clearly yesterday during her interview with Pranav, it is up to us, the publishers, to make the arguments for our industry and to underline the importance of publishers and publishing to the educational, social, economic and cultural health of the nation and the globe. Data and statistics is the necessary first step in that campaign. Before we head to Europe, which are the next bunch of countries that I'm looking at, let's have a brief stop on the Arab world and Africa. Unfortunately, I don't have a slide for these regions because we have no data. The Arab world has only recently seen digital e-readers integrate Arabic script and international operators entering their market. Remember, Africa is going to be where massive population growth is focused in the near future and where the demographics already lean massively to youth markets. It is also where publishing tends to be, like in India, predominantly focused on education. There are great innovators there, often trying to use digital technology as a way to overcome traditional infrastructure challenges. But there are also other issues in Africa and the Arab world around piracy, and we'll come back to that in a minute. The African continent is full of readers of the future, and tragically, we have almost no idea about what or how they read. I hope that our research project with Nielsen will provide more insights into that when it comes out at the end of the year. So, let's now look at 4 markets in Europe: Germany, the UK, France and Spain, where we have more data, but in many cases it's not comparable. Now, these are not the only European markets we could have chosen, but there is a lot more data available for Europe. But even there we have a mix of data sources: consumer, industry data. We have a mix of revenues, volume and turnover. Some are trade only, some cover education and STM as well. The top level figures here show how successful audiobooks are in Germany compared to many other markets we have seen. We also see strong digital book penetration in the UK, especially when we look at the proportion of turnover for digital books in France and Spain comparatively. So, looking at the UK data we have here is based on consumer surveys and only relates to trade publishing, but gives a high degree of granularity. We can see that the strength of physical books, along with a strong proportion of digital books, with fiction driving the ebook market and to a lesser extent audiobooks. The predominant business model varies depending on the format, with subscriptions being more popular for audiobooks. Look at the device figure for a moment. 75% using e-readers or tablets. Let's come back to that in a minute. The data we have from Germany is less granular, but demonstrates a market where digital books are widely adopted and still growing, with subscriptions forming a solid part of market revenues. In France, we have everything. Numbers about trade, education, and STM. The digital book market is growing, but we can see that STM publishing has a really big impact on the total proportion of digital books revenue across all sectors. Subscriptions and a la carte seem to be evenly balanced in terms of proportions of revenue generated. Finally, let's look at Spain, where we have a mix of industry and consumer data. Audiobooks aren't pulled out separately, so ebooks are still dominant. The reader data is where it gets interesting and a bit concerning, with digital books jumping to 18% compared to the 5.2% revenues that they generate. When we zoom in on that, we see that 57% of the digital readers are reading free downloads, and that the e-readers and tablets are only making up 23% of devices. Compare that device rate to the 75% that I pointed to in the UK figures. Some suggest that these numbers mean that piracy is a major source of digital reading in Spain, something that resonates with the challenges, albeit at a different scale, that we hear in Africa and the Arab world. My last data points come from the latest WIPO data. I have to express IPA's gratitude to WIPO for taking on the data challenge 6 years ago and for sticking with it. As I mentioned, for New Zealand, good data doesn't come together straight away. And as we saw for the US, it really makes a difference when you can look at consistent data over a number of years. WIPO is working to identify markets for support on data collection and start increasing the global vision for our sector, mainly at the moment in South American countries. In this slide, we show what the retail environment looks like for the book world. And we can clearly see that there are markets like the UK, Korea, and Italy where digital retail is the main way people buy books. Ladies and gentlemen, what does this book world look like? Well, we know that market data of some type exists for about only 40 countries. The WIPO stats have about 30 at the moment. That means that there are a lot of data darkness out there. And now I can come to the title of this session, the significance of data. Why is all this important? The pandemic has shown us that in many ways we cannot continue with business as usual. Many markets around the world have had a big wake-up call. I spoke of IPA's ability to tell a compelling story about the innovation within our sector, about our value, the value of publishing. But it goes deeper than that and affects in many ways many of the policy areas I spoke of earlier and that are covered in today's program. Look at the issue of copyright protection and piracy. We see one of our major European markets, Spain, where the majority of readers, we think, of digital books do so from free downloads. In Africa and the Arab world, we hear publishers say that they won't shift to digital because of the risk of piracy, and their copyright enforcement regimes won't protect them. In all likelihood, there are probably many potential digital book readers in these regions, but they remain excluded from the market. Even in strong markets like the UK, we see discounted ebooks make up a large part of sales and suggesting real price sensitivity. That price sensitivity also extends to devices. We have regions where the cost of a dedicated e-reader is really high compared to local salaries. Let's think about accessibility. Ebooks and audiobooks done properly, are a great way of making better products that can reach even more readers, including those who are visually impaired or otherwise print disabled. The European Accessibility Act will come into force in 2025, just around the corner. Despite its name, it will affect publishers outside of Europe as well. From 2025, any publishers selling into Europe must have accessible formats available. Born Accessible has to be the target for future books, but what about backlists? Besides that, what is the potential of AI narration to help with that backlist challenge and make more books available quickly? Let's think about sustainability. Without real detailed data, how can we understand the environmental impact of our sector? In all the markets we looked at, print is still king. How can we work with the supply chain to reduce carbon impact of physical books? How can we reduce the physical waste of pulping, the environmental impact of shipping and returns? Let's think about literacy. The digital book world is an opportunity to boost literacy rates everywhere, even in the hardest to reach places. We need comparable data, whether it's revenues, turnover or volume, trade, education or STM, ebook, audiobook or learning platforms, a la carte, subscriptions or other e-readers, tablets or smartphones. I know we are all competitors, and some of this data can be commercially sensitive. It can also cost a lot to collect, and it can take a number of years before solid data can be collected from a particular market to make a particular narrative. But collecting data and statistics about book publishing offers us the opportunity to make our presence felt in the corridors of government and the media, and to reach more readers, to educate more people, to build literacy rates around the world, to achieve greater scientific progress. The stakes are high, and data can help drive it. Thank you. That's not me, by the way.
Thank you so much, Jose. I think I'll come back to you before you take a breath and get some water. Basant, I think you are also, as a Dainik Jagran, you are also very much connected with the Hindi publishing, and I think you are one of the leading Hindi newspaper. How you see yourself connected, and what kind of programs that you are running in for the Hindi publishing, and that will help the publishing world in India? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. And I think after a global perspective so brilliantly given by Jose, I think let's also take a look at what's happening around in India. We're in the newspaper space, but internally and in all discussions with all our team members, we believe that we are a content company at heart. We are here to provide content to people. We provide content across multiple formats now, across multiple languages, but Hindi, of course, is the parent brand for us. And very clearly, there used to be a time when this entire content creation was a one-way street. We created content, served it to people, people read it and created their points of view on it. But over the last 8, 10 years, or maybe even 15 years, if you could say, ever since the digital revolution has started off, we believe that as a content company, earlier I was a newspaper company, now I believe that I'm a content company. As a content provider, I now compete with any and everybody. I compete with TV, I compete with a YouTuber, I compete with a blogger, I compete with an influencer. Anybody who's providing content is my competitor now. That's how I look at it. Even radio, for example, is a competitor. When I look at my content from that point of view, we have a huge constituency. We have about 7 crore readers who read Jagran. Now, obviously, it's not one mass of readers. It's all of those 7 crores are people who are very, very different. And that's when, for us, it's become very important to micro-segment this audience of ours. So in our own analysis, I look after strategy at the group, and in our own analysis, we divide our entire audiences across some hundreds of micro segments, so to say. And each of these micro segments we study in depth to understand who they are, what's happening in their lives, what kind of people they are, what do they read, when do they read, how do they read, what plant shops they do go. So we are trying to understand everything about and the role of content in their lives and the need for content at different stages in their life. So I think from our standpoint, when I start now creating content, I'm creating content for multiple micro segments. There are multiple constituencies within one Jagran. So there is streaming content. I create, most of my journalists are now multimedia journalists. We do audio feeds, we do video feeds, we do text stuff. We put it online. We've got the newspaper, we've got long form journalism, short form, and you call it, it's all there. And all of it is powered by data. It's not for nothing that we've been able to maintain leadership over such a long period of time. One is, of course, the kind of geographies that we cover, but B, importantly, most of the content decisions are now powered by data, and I cannot underscore the significance of data in our company. Even the circulation drives that we do, we end up capturing so much of data. In fact, at any point in time, on a given day, I think even today, for example, I will be collecting at least 5,000 data points from across my footprint. And that data exercise has been going on for a very long time. It actually gives us granular insights into what people are doing, what they're reading, and what is it that I need to serve to them to continue to be relevant. So that's the significance of data and when it comes to content. The second bit is we are largely in the Hindi space, and one of the most important things that we've always believed is that as a leader, it's important to push the boundaries of the category. How do I make sure that the category grows? Okay, and it's very important for leaders to take that stance. So what we've done over the last 7-8 years is that we've thought very deeply about it, and we've created a program or an initiative called Hindi Hai Hum. Under this program, what we do is we will undertake exercises to promote and continue the legacy of Hindi. Is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a new relevance for Hindi, trying to create new segments for Hindi, so that the category expands and we as a brand stand to gain from that. And clearly, some of the initiatives that we've undertaken under that is, within the Hindi domain, there are lots of dimensions to Hindi. So one of the domains was literature, for instance, Hindi literature. And when it comes to Hindi literature, if you look at the last 75-80 years of India's independence, several big writers have come in, lots of books have been written, there are some cult books, legacy books, there are lots of poets who've come in, etc. But somewhere there's a lot of, if I may say, the entire reading culture is pretty informal. I get to know about what to read from my friend circles or from people whom I know. Okay, and there's no really data-driven method to tell people that this is what India is reading and this is what possibly should read. So discoverability of the Hindi content, particularly in the literature field, was very important. So that's when I contacted Vikrant and the Nielsen team, and we said, let's create a robust mechanism and a methodology to arrive at what people are reading, what books are being read in fiction, in non-fiction, in translations, in poetry, what is it that's being read, and what is relevant in today's day and age. Classics, chalo, everybody's reading. Munshi Premchand, everybody's reading. But in the last 5-7 years, in the concurrent 5-7 years, what is it that people are reading? Where are the new Munshi Premchands? Where are the new writers? Where are the new Surendra Mohan Pathaks? Where are the new authors? And how do we create new authors for the future? What is the next generation going to read? With those questions, when we went out, so we said, let's do a very basic thing. Let's create a Hindi bestsellers, a completely unheard of thing ever in the Indian market. And for the first time, I think we, along with the Nielsen team, we created a methodology where we went offline to lots of cities across the Hindi belt. And of course, the Nielsen, of course, captures a very, very comprehensive view of the online sales, which Jose also presented, that online sales retail as a retail channel is big. So we merged those two methodologies and created a very, very specific and a customized methodology to come up with Hindi bestseller ratings. We do it every quarter. And I think one of the most important feedbacks that we've got from the Hindi publishing industry is that it has created new benchmarks. It has pushed the markets. It is creating new readers. The authors are happy that they're now featuring bestseller lists, etc. So there are lots of marketing standpoints apart from that. But I think what has also happened, it has helped in content discoverability. And I think that's the biggest role that we played in this entire thing. So the Hindi bestseller lists are just not announced this way. I put it on my platforms, across all my online, offline platforms. And we reach out to over 100 million people on a daily basis. And that's the kind of reach that we provide. Then we are doing book reviews, we do author interviews, we do book launches. We're doing several industry, if I may say, literature festivals in Hindi. So for example, I'm doing a Bihar Samvadi. Our literature festivals are called Samvadi. I go to Bihar and I do a Bihar Samvadi, which is about literature in and around Bihar. I'm doing something in Gorakhpur, I'm doing something in Prayagraj, something in Banaras, something in Lucknow. All of this is really to promote this entire thought of the new pockets of Hindi. At the same time, there are lots of young people who write nowadays. Okay, they find no way to publish their work. So we said, how do you get it discovered? How do we create the future leaders and the future authors of India? And that's when we started creating a program called Jagran. Srijan is what we are calling. Srijan is about creativity. So what we did was we appointed mentors across the Hindi belt, got young budding writers who've never published a book ever to mentor under these, to have mentorship sessions under these mentors who are established authors in their own rights, and develop a story over a period of time, have developed some work, develop some book, and then pitch that work to publishers. And if somebody finds it good enough to go to the market, then the publishers take it up and take the story to the market. So the idea is to also not just create readers, the idea is also to create new authors. And let me tell you, all of this is powered clearly by data. And so there are several of these kind of initiatives that we've taken. We've launched a fellowship program in which we want to create original Hindi research work. So that fellowship program, I think we've got the best in the industry to really mentor. Every year we identify 3 or 4 people and we identify projects across them. We fund those projects, they come back with research, white papers, etc. They get covered in Jagran, and then those papers are then published by the industry. So the idea is, how can I as a publisher push the envelope? How can I create a segment for Hindi readership? How can I create new readers? How can I create new writers? And when I create that ecosystem to power a language, and I think it's this language that has given so much to us as a publisher. I think it's time for us also to do something towards the language. And it's a very humble and a very, very small step in that direction. And I'm sure as we go along, this is what is really going to hold the language in great stead and really, really actually help all the constituents in the industry. So that's what we are about. And for us, powering all of these decisions through data is a very, very critical and a cornerstone for all our projects. So that's what I have to.
Thank you, Basant. I think you also talked about the mix of digital versus the print, because your newspaper is very heavy on print. And we saw from the Jose data that it's across the geographies. He presented that digital is there, but it's not been as we have envisaged in early 5 years back. I mean, US is still at 20%, and many markets are under a single digit. How you see, do you have any data in the newspaper, how much digital versus print? And you also touched upon a small of piracy. Do you see that as a challenge in the newspaper, because newspaper ticket size is fairly small? So how you see these two?
When it comes to the online versus offline, and typically the debate is always about whether online is going to overtake offline, etc. So I clearly see it as very complementary. In fact, I've conducted lots of research by exercises around, and not just horizontal research. I've conducted vertical research. I've gone down to villages. I've gone down to towns that are 20,000 towns, 50,000 towns, 70,000 population towns, 1 lakh, 2.5 lakh population. And I've done a vertical study of this way just to understand how do people consume information and content. And if I just give you a very broad finding of this entire thing, clearly, if I look at 100 people who consume any form of news and information in the morning, out of those 100, 70 of them are on newspapers. In the morning, which is the 6 to 9 on the 10 o'clock band. From 10 to 4, if I look at the entire daytime band, that is when digital starts picking up. And if I look at the evening time band, which is typically the 6 to 10, 11 kind of format in the evening, that's where TV takes up big time. A lot of TV debates people are watching, etc. So if I look at it as a content company from my end, I'm clearly looking at it saying, set the agenda in the morning through the paper, carry on the conversation during the course of the day through digital, and cap the day with a debate at night on TV. That's how I see the entire flow of the news ecosystem flowing. So for me, digital complements rather than competes. It actually helps me do a lot because, for example, we do 3,000 stories a day. I don't have all the space to promote it in my newspaper. I've got about 20, 25 pages on a day I will do in a paper. Where do all the stories go? They all go to my digital feed. And they all go to my social feed, they go to my Twitter feeds, etc. So very clearly, I see digital as an ally. I see digital as a means to open my content to markets beyond my current geographies where my print does not go to. So for me, it's a market expansion exercise. It's my content that goes across several platforms. So that's how I see digital versus print.
And anything on the piracy that you see?
Piracy aspect, I don't think we are worried about as much because news is like news. We deal largely in news and information, and that's really in the public domain. And there are several sources, etc. So as of now, I don't see issues with respect to piracy. But going forward, there's a lot of custom content that we are creating, and there's a lot of long-form journalism, a lot of research-backed content, which we get into really, and there are appropriate protocols that we create in terms of trying to protect that content. So that's where it is. But it's not really a big threat as of now.
Jose, I mean, yesterday the minister was here and she did talk about when Pranav asked the question about how we come into the picture of policy, and minister said, you need to create a surge. From the perspective of the global, how you see that what is the other markets are doing in terms of, because the revenue size, if you look at the reading habits, are fairly very large. If you look at the UK and US market, even in the New Zealand, and we did talk about yesterday that about, if you look at the trade business out here, is fairly very small. It's very in the very single digit number. If you go to the African market and many more other developing nations, their numbers are not that big. So is in India, where India is also like a educational hub. And we have been given a challenge of creating a surge. How you see that from and what is the takeaway and what the learning that you have and what message that you want to give, because most of the industry people are here. Your comments.
Okay. On a global level, publishers have been very, very bad at telling our story. We don't get the message across of how big this industry is globally, and part of that is to do with the lack of data and statistics from what I call the blank spots across the globe. But even in places where we have the data, publishers have not been historically very good at getting the message across that publishers for the last 500 years have been publishing and disseminating information that has got us here to where we are today. The amount of information, the amount of scientific research, the amount of non-fiction, fiction, and anything else that you can think of that is being pumped out by publishers around the world every day is phenomenal and has been for the last 500 years. And yet, we're still lumped together in a strange category where people don't know very much about us, or they disrespect us, or they distrust us. They're much more liable to trust the big platforms. And yet, it's the big platforms that I'm fighting against in WIPO every year. The World Intellectual Property Organization is filled with organizations coming to their various meetings who want to undermine copyright. And a lot of those organizations are paid for and financed by Google, let's name them, Google, Amazon, and the rest of them. And those companies have a really good profile around the world, and yet they are almost at the point of destroying the copyright regime. We need to fight against them, and we are. We're doing a really good job in Geneva in that respect. But individual publishers and individual publishers associations also have to stand up and say how proud you are about what you do in the context of a social, economic, and cultural history. You have to say that you are and have been stalwarts in the projection of knowledge all around the world, and the progress that we have at the moment is partly to do with your work. So that's a very long way of answering your question. Did I get
No,
somewhere
you-
near?
Yeah, absolutely. You were there, absolutely. And Jose, you, in your presentation, you also talked about that under the leadership of Karani Pansa, the president of IPA, you have created a department, data and statistics. Now IPA has that because IPA relies and understand the importance of the data, and that's why you have created that as a new committee. And you also continued working with the WIPO of creating the global publishing report. Is there any message that you also wants to give it out to the associate members or the members that is there with IPF 76 number is a big number of creating such committees so that data is going to be made available, because we have seen in the WIPO report limited amount of countries participate. So is there a message going on from the IPA to have this kind of data committees and make the data available and take the informed decisions and help in policy making?
Yeah, it's a two-way street. One of the reasons that Karini decided that we needed a data and statistics committee was that we had a survey last year of our members, and one of the things that our members said that they wanted was more data and statistics. So it's a two-way street, and part of that imperative, as I said, comes from bottom up. But another part of it, as I said, and I mentioned Minister Irani yesterday, when talking to politicians, it's no good walking into a politician's office and saying, hello, you really need to help me. You need to walk into a politician's office and say, I represent this huge industrial complex. You need to be able to say how many publishers you represent. You need to show how much those publishers pump into the economy, how many people they employ, etc., etc. Without those details, and thanks in India to Nielsen book data, you have that. Without those details, you can't really convince a politician of whatever stripe that they should take you seriously, that they should listen to you, and that they should take your advice. So data is central to that. What we're working towards over the next few years, I hope, is a much more robust set of numbers. I'm hopeful that we can get a number for the global publishing industry that is, if not 100% accurate, then at least the best that you can get in town. And with that number, I want to be able to talk to politicians around the world, to media around the world, and to the general public, and show the value of publishers, the value of publishing. And you'll be hearing a lot of that kind of talk, that kind of rhetoric from the speeches that Karini makes and that all of us make over the next few years. We've decided that we need to stand up on our two back legs and tell everybody that we are an industry that you should be proud of.
Thank you. And I think on the India Book Market Report, I must credit Mr. Ashok Ghose sir and Pranav for taking that initiative, because we did that report in 2015 and it took 7 years gap before they commissioned, and they were the one who has the vision of producing some interesting statistics information. And Mr. Dr. Ashok Gupta was the one who was saying that report is fine, but you need to also connect the dots with the economic contribution the industry is making, because there's a huge amount of revenue being created by the industry, but there's also a lot of indirect revenue being created by the printers, employment, and that is what came out. Basan, since you are the newspaper leader and you also look at the data, not only publishing, but you also look at the data for other sector, do you have any story that you want to say to these publishers, that how the data are being used and how data is been claimed in the other sectors? That's a learning for the industry.
In fact, one of the things about data is that, and I keep telling it to all my internal team members, be it journalists or editors, and we tell them very clearly that the market has shifted. Long back, as an editor, and I would tell this to my editors, and long back, as an editor, your job ended once you finished writing the piece. And you were ensured that your piece would be carried in the newspaper, it'll go to the doorstep of somebody tomorrow, and somebody will be able to read it. you were assured. Okay, it was a one-way street. Now I said, this job of creating content and opinion is just not yours. That monopoly is no longer, it's been disrupted completely. You're competing with not just another newspaper, you compete with TV, you're competing with other bloggers, influencers, as I said, all that. So that content monopoly creation monopoly has got completely disrupted. It is now the era of content discoverability. Your job will begin after you write the piece. So go to your Twitter account and start writing about what you've just written. It's now your job as an editor to actually now get your content to be discovered. And I think there's been a fundamental shift in mindsets. And when you start talking of discoverability, you might be a great, for example, there are lots of examples where a great editorial write-up put behind a content paywall. Nobody wants to pay money and access that content. So what's the point of creating great content when nobody's reading it? Okay. So the entire idea is that how can we ensure that our content is discoverable? And I think that's a fundamental shift in mindsets. And clearly when you start looking at that from that point of view, then you start looking at, okay, who are my readers? That's the next question. Okay, I'll tell you, this is your readers. Demographically, who they are. So I'll tell you age, gender, socioeconomic, black background, etc. But that's not good enough. How do I understand their mindsets? Okay, they are music enthusiasts, there are news junkies, there are this kind of people, there are people who relish political comment, there's some people who are sports enthusiasts, etc. So you'll find different kinds of content, if I may say, contents, cohorts created based on content likabilities. So I tell them that these are the kind of people who will possibly read your content. Okay, now we've got to fix that out of the 10 segments, these 3 are important to me. Now within these 3, what is it that they're referring to? What are the other sources of information? So are they more text savvy, reading savvy? Are they more digital reading savvy? Are they more visual kind of people? What are the kind of people? So should I create content in video form for them? Should I create it as a debate kind of concept for them? Should it be long form journalism? Should it be short form journalism? And that is all these decisions, all these questions of my editors are being answered through data. And clearly when you're able to align yourself to that, that's when the entire engine of content discoverability, content monetization starts beginning. And very clearly I say that what cannot be measured cannot be monetized. It's a simple philosophy. So you can choose to live in denial and say, no, my content is great and things are all good. But the other way is to say that, no, I've started competing and I must understand who my readers are and I must really give them content that is relevant. Because if my content ceases to be relevant, I cease to be relevant. I might not realize it now, but maybe in a couple of years, 2, 3 years, 4 times, I'll become dormant. So if I have to be at the top of my game, I better get into data. I better open my eyes. I better get my content discovered. And I think that's the crux for all content creators. It could be creative content writers. It could be a poetry guy. It could be a guy who writes ghazals, shairo shari jo likhne wale. It could be anybody for that matter. Your content must be discovered. Your content must be relevant to the audience that you're catering to. And you must deliver it in the platform that your audience wants it and at the time that your audience wants it. And for all of this, you need data and you need technology to power it. So.
Yeah, greatly. I think from the strategic point of view in India, I think we are also noting something similar trend that discoverability is one of the challenging in the publishing industry. I mean, I can say from the side of the trade books, the front list which are being published in a particular year, it's dropping. I mean, if you look at the UK, US, or any market that you look at, front list occupies about 40% of the market, while blacklist is about 60%. In India, was 12%, now it is dropped to 4.5%. Because of the reason is that the discoverability of book is not there, probably the budgets or the marketing are not being, therefore the importance of what Jose has shown, if the people are think from Tamil and everybody's look at, the channels roles are important. I mean, online is there in UK very dominantly, but if you look at the New Zealand market or any other regional market, the brick and mortar are still very heavy. So I think it's a combination of how you make a decisions based on the data that your books are in the hand of the people. Like Minister said that she still prefer to read in the print and she wants to read books than to hold a digital or any other medium. But it's the hand of the publisher that what decision making and the strategy they adopt using the informed decision. Otherwise, it's like creating a content which nobody is using it or nobody is reading it because it's not been a bit make discoverable and people not been able to identify. I know Pranav is giving a signal. So I want to have a last comments from both of you. How any message that you want to give or anything that you want to say.
I love that statement. What can't be measured can't be monetized. Maybe that should be the motto for the Data and Statistics Committee. Pranav, what do you think? I just want to emphasize the underlying message that I want to give, which is not necessarily about data and statistics, but data and statistics is very important as a stepping stone towards a message to as many people as want to hear or even don't want to hear that publishers are good for society, that we produce cutting edge information, whether it be educational, whether it be scientific, whether it be non-fiction or even fiction, and that we are we should be supported. We should be not just protected but supported by government. Media should be talking about our wins, the great steps forward that we've achieved, and we should be very suspicious about those forces within all our economies that would like to undermine copyright and would like to either increase the number of exceptions and limitations in copyright law in each country, or to try to somehow contravene what copyright is all about and put out stories that copyright is somehow an impediment to innovation. It is not. It is why we have the innovative society, the knowledge society that we do now. Thank you.
The last possibly comment from my side would be that I think content creators need to be very, very clearly aligned with their constituencies. To be aligned, you need to have data around them, and data need not always be quantitative. Even qualitative insights is great data, and sometimes in a creative field like content creation, qualitative insights or qualitative data means a lot more than just quantitative data. So just be aware of that, and at the same point in time, content creation shouldn't be an exercise in isolation. It's got to be aware of your constituents, their requirements, and maybe feed into those requirements, because you exist because of your readers, very, very clearly. And therefore, it's very important to understand them, both demographically and from a mindset standpoint. And every piece of data matters. At the same point in time, I think content aesthetics, the way content is packaged, the way content is presented, and the way content is marketed, I think these are the important aspects or pillars, if I may say, for content creation. It's no longer about creation alone. It's also about disseminating and ensuring that the discoverability of your content is great. And that will happen only when it is well packaged, well presented, given at the right time, to the right people, in the right frame of mind. And I think that's the key message on my side.
Thank you so much. And before we close, I think thank you to Mr. Gupta, Pranav, and FIP Core Committee for giving us the opportunity to speak here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful session on significance of data. And I'll request on behalf of Federation to present our gratitude. I'll request Monica ji to come on the stage and present the certificates to our esteemed panelists, please. Thank you very much.